Now 250,000. Now, but to get 275. High, but to get 275. 3. Now 300,000. Now 3 1/4. 325. High, but to get 3 1/4. But to get 325. Now half. Now but to get 300. And good morning from Lincoln Center in Dallas, Texas. Welcome to the Mike McGavel Jones Show. And we are excited and very happy to have with us today a world-famous auctioneer named Cookie Lockhart. And Cookie Lockhart and I have been friends for a long time. Welcome, Cookie.
Thank you, Mike. I'm so glad to be here.
I am happy you are, too. It worked out well that you were in town. I know that you've been visiting with another auctioneer and his family, and we had Angie Meyer had you come down to visit, and as it worked out, you were able to come to the Cattle Barons Ball with us last weekend and work that here in Dallas, which, of course, you know is the largest American Cancer Society fundraiser. So what did you think about that experience?
That was breathtaking. Mike, you did a fantastic job, and I just couldn't believe it. It kind of was always in my bucket list, and so when Angie asked me to come down and work it with you, I was just thrilled to death. Well, I was very honored.
Well, we were thrilled to have you, and of course Angie as well. So let's talk about, because we have limited time, but we have time to talk about a lot of different things. You were the very first woman inducted into the National Auctioneers Association Hall of Fame in 2007. Tell me what that felt like.
You could tell me what it felt like. You were 5 years behind me. Well, of course, I guess that's the biggest honor you can have is to be in the Hall of Fame, finally get accepted. And as you know, you're voted in there by your peers, not the general membership. And so it's just really cool when they finally accepted a woman.
Well, and that's true, because like in so many industries, there's kind of been a glass ceiling where there's kind of a men's club, I guess you'd say. Of course, when you look at it, until the last 25 years, we really didn't have the number of women in the industry. So you were a trailblazer from way back. So tell me about how you got in the auction business. Tell me about your family real quick, and kind of how your family was in the business, and just kind of give me the overview about how you got in the business to start with.
Well, as you know, I'm from Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which is the northwest corner of Colorado, and it used to be a mining but ranching community. And my dad was a horseman, teamster, and there was, at that time, there was quite a few little ranches, and they had, maybe 100 head of cows or so, and we get pretty deep snow and pretty cold. So before all the four-wheelers and motorized vehicles, of course, the only way to feed your cattle was with teams of horses. And the bank in Fort Collins in the 30s sent my dad. He was working in the sale barn, and he was an auctioneer, and they sent him to Steamboat to sell some of the ranchers' equipment. And he didn't like that part of it, but he saw a real need for him to be there. And we raised Belgian horses, and he taught people how to hook up harness and how to feed with teams and use what he thought was the most gentle of the draft horses was the big Belgian horses. And then my dad moved us to Steamboat as soon as he could get that done in the early 40s. And so I grew up there, and we had little farm sales. We traded livestock. My dad was the first ranch real estate broker, and my brother went into business with my dad. And then I went to auction school way back in the early 60s, sometime, maybe it was mid-60s. And my brother and I worked together quite a little and expanded the business. We later had an office in Denver as well as home, and sold a lot of auctions, and my brother became ill, and he was only 40 when he passed away.
Mm. You had a lot of influences in the auction business. Tell me some of the auctioneers that had the greatest influence over you, other than your immediate family. What other auctioneers that people might remember and not remember, but that meant a lot to you?
Bernie Hart was probably my biggest supporter. He was executive secretary of the National Auctioneers at the time and the National Auto Auction. And Bernie sort of coined me as the nation's leading lady auctioneer, which there wasn't. That was pretty easy. There wasn't any others. And so I was the only woman for years and years in the meetings and as a member, and because all the women were in the auxiliary. So Bob Penfield was very influential to me, livestock and real estate auctioneer from North Dakota. And when my brother passed away, Bob came and brought his whole family, and I had about 6 auctions going on, and he came, worked them all with me, and Bob was just very influential, I think, to many people in the auction business.
Oh, yeah.
And
he's still going.
And he still has at least one sale a year with the Old West stuff. He kind of keeps the Old West alive. And
how old is Bob?
I think Bob's 85, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's been a great friend of mine as well, and really to the industry as a whole. He's an icon. You're an icon. He's an icon, and you know that from that generation set the standard. You know, the high standard for good auctions and treating their customers right, and being all about the clients, the buyers, and the sellers.
That's right, and it still is among many auctioneers.
So now I understand you just had a big sale. This was it was just in the last month?
It was just a couple weeks ago. Yes.
Was it a couple of weeks ago? It was in October. 2-day sale.
Yes.
Tell me what was behind that? I know you've even had the TV show Pickers come to see you.
American Pickers came to see me at our home place where I grew up. Actually, the property's been in my family for 75 years or so, and it's all commercial now. It's just simply it's a tourist area. Everyone comes to Steamboat to ski or float the river or something to do with sports.
Yep.
And obviously not the same situation where I grew up, not the same needs. But it's all commercial, and our place was right on the river, right downtown. So it was just simply time to sell.
Sure.
And so I sold the place and had an auction and sold all my great collectibles.
Yeah. Well, you had a lot. How many lots did you have in that auction?
1,500.
1,500. And so tell me some of the types of things that you sold in that auction. Give me a flash of what.
Oh, a really darling merry-go-round that was sitting outside that went around and around. Actually still worked for a quarter. Had to put a quarter in it. Horses go up and down. Do you remember?
Sure.
When they used to be in front of stores.
Sure. I used to ride them.
Did you get bucked off?
Still do.
I bet you do. Late at night.
So you had a lot of great Western collectibles.
Yes, a lot of wagon wheels,
yep.
A lot of... I'm kind of glancing at my flyer here to remember what all I had, but many Western pictures and even had some auctioneers bid from across the country.
Sure.
Had me sign Buffalo Bill pictures. Now, I didn't even know Buffalo Bill. Mike, you might have known it.
So that was a rumor, huh?
I don't know why they wanted me to sign it. But things like the first lady's saddle that was ever made after women quit riding side saddle.
Yeah.
And wagon wheels. If you saw me on American Pickers, I'm telling you, everywhere I go, here, everyone says to me, "Did I see you on TV?" Or they'll come clear across the room and say, "Let me ask you something." And the answer is yes, you saw me on TV. But it's been about 3 years since they were at my place, but they keep showing the show about every 6 weeks or 2 months. And I literally have heard from people all over the world. I did not know it was that popular a show.
Well, and on top of that, you're known for how you dress because you dress impeccably. You're known for style, your Western look, the glasses, the hat, the whole 9 yards. I remember when my first NAA convention that I attended was probably in '82 or '83, and after that, you were like it was almost like an entourage. When you would come in, that's what I remember the most, and I still see it. Well, you would come in, but you'd have to have 3 bellmen just to bring in all the bags, right?
Are you exaggerating again?
I am not. I am not exaggerating. Between the different hats and the different boots and the different outfits, you were something special.
Well, Mike, it's difficult to carry a lot of hats with you, and any good head deserves a good hat.
That's right.
Well, you have to have a different hat for your outfits.
I understand.
But they're good hats.
So you were the first woman to enter into the World Livestock Competition. Is that right? And my understanding was in 1975.
And I just found all of the stats out about that because I was just on the front page of the Western Livestock Journal.
Yep.
They interviewed me, and that just happened like a couple weeks ago. And so they mentioned the year. I didn't remember what year, but I was the first woman ever entered the livestock contest. I was selling livestock at the time at a sale barn.
Do you know what year you joined the National Auctioneers Association?
I know my membership card. I know what it says. I used to argue with Chuck Cumberland, our old buddy, about this. But my guess actually is 1963.
So we're right in there. While we're on the subject of Chuck, because Chuck was one of my instructors in auction school, and he was a prince of a guy. And just say something about Chuck. What you remember about Chuck?
Well, I think Chuck inspired probably as many people to be in the auction business as any auctioneer there ever was. And he was a great instructor, as you said. He worked with me. I hired him numerous times. He was just a great guy, great auctioneer, kind of like my brother. Became ill and left us way too soon.
The thing about Chuck, he just kind of reminded me of that. He just looked like an auctioneer. And
yes, he did.
And he had that John Wayne kind of appeal.
And he always wore a good hat.
And he always wore a good hat. He did. He did. So you have another distinction in that you were, I'd say, featured on a television show. And so tell us about that experience where you were.
Way back?
Way back.
To Tell the Truth.
Yes. I used to watch To Tell the Truth. I know that you might find that hard to believe, but I remember watching To Tell the Truth myself in the 60s. And so tell us about that experience.
I think that was 1966, I believe. And I had a really good-sized auction in Denver, and they run a full-page colored ad, which I have a copy of. I don't know what that would cost today, but back then they run this full-page ad and said, the only woman auctioneer and whatever, however they worded it. And from that, I suppose they have scouts everywhere like big TV shows would have. Sure. But I had a call from New York and asked me to be on the show. The show's What's My Line? People often say, I saw you on What's My Line. What's My Line and To Tell the Truth were both owned by Goodson Todman at the time. Mm-hmm. And they flew me to New York, which I'd never been on a plane. And at the time I got there, they hadn't quite decided which show they were going to have me on. But What's My Line, as you know, they ask you a lot of questions, figure out what someone's occupation is. On the one I was on is To Tell the Truth. They have two imposters, and they can say anything they want to, but the real one has to tell the truth, or you don't win any money. I won $750 and a trip to New York.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was.
I have seen a copy of the show, and I have shared that in auction school, at our auction school.
It's on YouTube.
Okay, so now folks can go to YouTube, and where would they go to see what would
you
they
just
put
go to
in there?
YouTube and type in my name,
Cookie Lockhart.
Cookie Lockhart, and then you see a picture of Kitty Carlisle, if you remember her.
I do.
I always had on the furs and diamonds, and she was one classy lady. And by the way, she's the only one out of the four on the panel that did guess who I was.
Oh, really? Who all was on that panel? Do you remember who was on the panel besides Kitty Carlisle?
Peggy Cass and Bud Collier and forgot the other one.
Yeah. I used to watch that show regularly, you know. Of course, it was a different time, you know, but it was cool. I mean, it really was cool.
It was cool, and the thing about it was the questions that they asked me, I didn't know the answer, but I had to tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And they run out of time, or they'd have had me, because they asked where I went to auction school. And I don't think the other girls that was imposters would have had any idea what to say then.
Yep.
But right then it got shut off. But some of the questions they asked, of course, when they introduced me, they said I'd sold, equipment and livestock and real estate at auction and antiques. Well, the questions they asked had to do with what you might consider like northeastern antiques.
Yep.
They asked me questions I didn't know the answer to. So that's what really threw them.
Yep.
In other words, I wasn't smart enough, but I was smart enough to win.
That's all that matters. What is if you can remember, what's the most expensive thing you ever sold? Single item.
What do you mean if I can remember?
Single item. Well, I can't remember. People ask me that. People ask me all the time, what's the most interesting or what's the weirdest thing? And I don't have an easy answer for it. I really don't.
I know the weirdest thing, but I don't know if you want me to say it live.
Well, probably not.
Probably not.
Hey, I have one of those too.
Had to do with a donkey.
Well, okay. Tell me.
The biggest.
I know. Go ahead and tell me that because I have another question, a follow-up question to that.
It's difficult, like you say, to say the biggest thing because you try to think, was it a big caterpillar or a big piece of equipment or the biggest auction I ever had or the biggest opportunity was I liquidated an oil company called Highway Oil out of Topeka.
That's where I was going.
And
that's where I was going.
I beat you, huh?
Yeah.
And so I ended up selling real estate at auction in 18 states. And that lasted 3 years. It took 3 years to do that.
When did you do that? What years were you doing that?
The reference letter they wrote was 2006, so it must have ended about that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a great story too. Anytime you can work for a big company, it really makes you feel. It's kind of like going in the Hall of Fame when you can land an iconic brand.
Yeah.
And get paid to do it. Because there's a lot of people that probably do it for free just so they can say they did it. It's nice to get paid. So you have a daughter, Jo.
I have 2 daughters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
One works with me part-time, and her home's in Steamboat. She also is married, and her husband's a supervisor on a big project in California, so she spends quite a little time with him out there. And my other daughter is, she works in Whittier, Alaska.
Ooh.
And she works all the time at several jobs.
Yeah.
One of the jobs, she's a supervisor, like if there's ever another big oil spill. And she has her own transportation company from Anchorage to Whittier. It's a really cool little town. She says she found a town like Steamboat, only it has an ocean.
Yeah.
And a lot of ships dock there.
Sure. That's cool.
It really is.
So now you're transitioning. You've sold your stuff. You're basically at that point where you're trying to figure out what the next thing you're going to do. And I know you've kind of been in this transition mentally for some time, trying to think about what you want to do. Not when you grow up, but
when I grow up.
So you've been doing all this stuff for a long time. You've liquidated your miscellaneous, which every auctioneer eventually has to do it. Before we went on, I told her I need to have a sale myself.
I know a good auctioneer. Happens to be in town right now.
I hear that all the time.
I know you do.
But it's really funny because what we do is, you talk about hoarders. We tend to be hoarders to some degree, and either we're buying something, or we're trading something, or we inherit something, and next thing you know, you've either got a barn full or buildings full. And that's kind of what happened with you. Of course, when you live somewhere for 75 years, you can do that easier. It's a little more expensive when you do it in the city because storage is expensive.
Yes, and when my dad passed away, he had built what a lot of people would just call a pole barn that he just attached to the house. And that was a great big room, and he thought we needed a store. Mm-hmm. So I really made it into an Old West store. And then I had a gal that worked for me for many years who was very loyal, and she got sick and passed away. And so after that, I just couldn't do the auctions and the store and
everything.
And let's face it, I'm just not a storekeeper. I might have an antique shop when I get older, but that's just not me. And so we just kind of closed that store.
Yep.
And then I just kept the places, like an office and meeting room and whatever. But all that stuff was still there. And so that was a whole lot of it.
Right. Tell me about your transition from selling livestock to doing real estate. When did that happen? When did you start recognizing, was that because of your father, or did it just naturally happen over time?
Well, part of it is where I live. To be in the auction business, you about have to have either industry or you have to have a big population. And, where I live, there just isn't either one. So all the ranches have been bought up by other people, and they just don't run cattle there like they used to, so those don't change. And I guess in answer to your question, when like the fellow just asked me, what do you sell? My answer is always bulls, buttons, buffalo, bulldozers, rabbits, rakes, ratchets, and real estate, to name a few. So it was really difficult to specialize.
Yeah.
I had an office in Denver for several years, and still we sold everything, business liquidations and real estate.
Do you have any idea, and this is hard, I mean, we always approximate this. Auctioneers do this all the time. I get a kick out of what some auctioneers say, but do you have any idea how many auctions you've conducted in the last 50 years? Mike,
I really don't. At a real estate auction that took literally 2 months getting ready, and it was complicated, joining the Forest Service, and ended up taking about 3 months to get it settled. So that one auction last year, or in the last year and a half, literally took 4 months to get through with it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do much else.
Yeah.
And it isn't like having an auction house where you have a weekly sale. So
yeah.
It's always difficult for me to answer. I sold over 200 properties for that one company in 18 states, but that's really unusual. That's a once-in-a-lifetime thing.
When you were doing livestock, how often were you doing the livestock sales?
Oh, then that was every week.
Yep.
Those
count.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that's
they
true.
add up.
I sold at a sale barn outside of Denver, but pretty soon you just move on, have your own business, and if you don't own a sale barn.
Yep.
I just did a benefit auction in Montana, and stopped to see an old friend, the Odels, and stopped to see Ted Odell, who now owns this sale barn in Butte, Montana.
Right.
And he got me up there to sell livestock, and it had been a long time since I sold those old cows, but it comes right back to you, just like playing the piano, I guess, if you ever knew how.
Yeah.
And it was really fun.
Yeah, I bet it was. What's the best advice you ever got in the auction business? If you think about it, if you look back at some of the people that you've worked with, and you've known everybody. I mean, if you think about it, you've been blessed. I think the thing I tell people all the time, of course, technology's taken over so much today, and that's not my thing. I'm not a technology. Everybody knows that. I'm it's like I tell people all the time. I'm a talker. I'm not a technology guy, and you are too. You're a talker. You're not a technology woman. I think we both have been able to live the American dream as an auctioneer because we lived in the best of times, where we didn't have the distractions of TV and computers and phones, and people only had 2 or 3 TV stations to watch, and they didn't have a mall to go to on the weekend. So we really did. We lived the dream for the auctioneer, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't mean to be offensive, but a lot of people think because they have a camera and a computer, they're in the auction business. And that's, like you say, that's just not us. I think the internet's a big thing, and of course we have to have it for advertising and our websites, all that. But I'm like you. I'm a people person, and I think the best advice that I ever had, and people do not care how much you know till they know how much you care. And that takes a one-on-one relationship to find out what their needs are. Oftentimes their needs are not the same as their wants.
Sure.
And to gain that confidence, you have to have a one-on-one relationship with people, and that takes time.
Sure.
It takes time to develop.
Yep. You have a lot of young people like Angie Meyer that look up to you, and you mean a lot to a lot of people. Do you feel like by being around the younger people that it keeps you younger too?
Well, something must.
Good genes, evidently. Good genes. And,
Good genes, right?
I don't mean Wranglers or Levi's.
Well, of course. And I enjoy being around my peers as well. You learn from the wisdom of others. My dad, one of his, he had 2 favorite expressions, but he was full of psychology. And one of them was, there's always work for a worker. So don't think when people say they can't find work, they just don't want to work. And I put both these things on his tombstone. But the other one was, you can't buy experience. You got to earn it.
Yep.
And that's so true, You can't do it any other way. You can't learn from going to school.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you need to have that, but that's your start.
You need the education, but doing it is the real deal.
That's right. You need the education. You need the start, just like going to school. When you get out of high school, you got to figure out what else you're going to do.
Yep.
And
well, and it's like auction school too. A lot of people go to auction school, and people ask me all the time, out of a class, how many will actually make it as an auctioneer? And I tell them, it's like anything else. It's what you put into it. If you don't really, if you're not willing to go out there and do some free work, and get the experience, the other thing about they always say, what does an auctioneer make? Well, that depends on the auctioneer. It's like professional golf, right? You've always got the same 100 people out of millions of people that make the bulk of the money, and there's a reason for that. It's because they work harder, they work longer, they put in the hours, they're dedicated, and it's painful. I mean, it doesn't come easy. Nothing great comes easy. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think consistency is just a really vital word to being successful. So many people try and, that didn't work, give it up. I've seen a lot of real estate officers think they can get in the auction business, and they'll try it one time. They don't have the background or we just know from past experience. It may not be the same thing happen, but we know what not to do because it happened maybe 25, 30 years ago. Something happened. All of a sudden that comes to you and goes, don't do that, do it this way. And so I've seen that several times, and they'll have an auction and it won't be successful, and that doesn't help the auction business because the next thing you know, everyone's saying, oh, yeah, they tried one of those auctions down there and it didn't work. Well, it didn't work for a lot of reasons. And you have to be consistent about it and stay with it.
Yep.
I think it takes years and years to actually become a really successful, great auctioneer.
I do too. I agree with that 100%. 100%. We both have a great passion for the National Auctioneers Association.
Yes, we do.
And our state association. I know being from Colorado, you've been very active in your state association. Just tell me your take on why it's important to be a part of an association of your peers.
Well, I certainly wouldn't have ever been able to do the things I had the opportunity to do if I had not been involved, and the relationships you make across the country, literally across the world. We both have friends today in Mexico and South Africa and Canada, and there's no way you would have made those relationships. The education's great. What you learn in the hallways and the friendships you make is greater. And I don't know, if you're not involved, you're just not involved. I think you have to just jump in full blast, be totally involved with it. And as you say, I'm very dedicated and very loyal to the National Auctioneers. They have so much to offer, and people that aren't in it, they just don't know what they're missing.
Yeah. I always say that 90% of life is showing up.
And that's right.
If you're not there, nobody knows where you are, and nobody cares where you are.
And that's exactly right.
You got to be present. You got to be present. I've got about a minute to go, and so I know that you're thinking about transitioning, moving potentially somewhere else. You want to say
it might even be Texas.
It might be Texas. Why don't you kind of just tell the folks that are tuning in, because this is going to be out there for it's all over the world. There's people right now. We don't even know where they all are right now, but there's probably people in South Africa. We get people from South Africa, Germany, Canada, Mexico, Asia, for that matter. So tell people what you're thinking you'd like to do for the future.
Well, I've been narrowing it down, but I think I really don't want to retire. I'm not sure auctioneers ever retire. I guess some of them do, but I don't have time to tell you the story I was thinking. But I am thinking of I had an office for years in the Denver area, and that's certainly on my radar. But I do love Texas. I always thought I'd make a good Texan.
I think you probably would too.
I think I would. So you can't do it alone, though. You have to find the opportunity and someone you can work with that has the same goals and the same ideas, same ideals as you do. So I might find a company here. I might become a Texan.
We'll see. We'll see. Well, Cookie, it's been an honor to have you on the show. I don't just invite anybody on the show because I really care about who comes on. And with your history and your past and our friendship over the years, I'm glad that you were able to be here with us. As you know, I'm getting ready to leave in about 5 minutes and fly to Memphis to St. Jude Children's Hospital, which we're all passionate about. The
Yes.
Auctioneers are very passionate about St. Jude, and I'm going to go up and watch the 2018 champions, Emily and
Right.
Barrett, as they do the auction with the kids, and then we're going to do a little check presentation from the auction school, and so that's how that day is going to go. So it's going to be a busy day, and we do want to do a quick shout out. I meant to do a shout out to Katie Bach and Jonica Nix, who were the chairs of Cattle Barons Ball.
Oh,
that
yes.
was that, and you were a part of the record-breaking Cattle Barons Ball. It was the biggest one they've ever had. Over 3,000 people. We had over 25 auctioneers and ringmen work that event, and
That
you
was
being a part of it.
amazing.
And we were certainly tickled to have you with us. So
Yes.
I'm looking forward to seeing you again at our next convention, our conference and show for the 2019 National Auctioneers Association Conference and Show, which is going to be in New Orleans.
Yes.
And we'll be seeing you there. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Mike.
God bless you.
Thank you for having me.
You bet.
At 25, I get 30, would get 35, you get 40, 40, 40, would get 45, would get 50. Sold it right over there, Mike the buyer. Next lot.
Thank you very much, Cookie Lockhart. All right, for everybody here at Lincoln Center in Dallas, Texas, at the Mike McGavel Jones Show, we thank you for being with us. God bless you. We'll see you next time.